Welcome to the Voice of Retail for the week of November 11th, 2019. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. In this week's action-packed episode, the focus is on the grocery section. From putting your money where your mouth is in terms of funding and supporting innovation, to standing up a specialty grocery store, to understanding the big picture trends and the ways and means of food regulation in our nation's capital. First of all, recorded live at the launch of District Ventures Kitchens in Toronto, I check in with Arlene, Dickinson, CEO of District Ventures, as she adopts and supports this innovative professional kitchen production space for food entrepreneurs. While there, I meet Jana Sobey, VP Merchandising Community Format, Thrifty Foods and Field for Sobey, and we talk about the importance of supporting innovation right on the shelves. My last three interviews are recorded live at RCC's DTL conference in Montreal. First up, Professor Sylvain Charlebois returns to the podcast, talk food trends, vegetarians, the upcoming release of his authoritative Canada's Food Price Report, and the state of the edible cannabis nation. Then I meet Lika Niasse, owner of African Soul Food Specialty Grocery in Gatineau, Quebec. And lastly, but certainly not least, RCC's Jason McLinton, Vice President, Grocery Division Regulatory Affairs, and we talk food policy and retail. Whew. But don't worry, it's not a 5-hour episode, just action-packed. Finally, I'll take a look at the retail news of the week, but first, let's listen to my interview with Arlene, then Jana. Arlene, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. Nice to be here. Tell us about what we're doing here today at District Ventures Kitchens.
Well, we're celebrating the launch or the relaunch of District Ventures Kitchen, which was the food starter program that the City of Toronto had stood up. They transitioned it to us to manage it and to become part of the District Ventures ecosystem. So now we have a kitchen, we have an accelerator, we have the fund, we have the marketing. So we really have that whole journey from startup to later stage companies in the food and beverage space to be able to grow and develop, which is something that this nation needs. And I'm really excited about what both the city has done to help us here to get this transition to us, but also what we're building in general is very cool.
You've been very articulate about a nation needing more than a startup tech, or we need a good ag tech, but your organization, District Ventures, is really behind that. So how important is this to the companies you back and to the ecosystem that we're creating here?
Well, listen, agri-food is incredibly important, not just for Canadians and the food that we consume and how we take care of ourselves as a nation, but also for export. So I believe that we are very good at exporting commodities, but what we need to be better at is taking the commodities we have and turning them into products of value that we can get more margin for, more value for in terms of supporting the globe. Food safety, food traceability, food security, these are global issues that Canada can help solve. And while, the tech sector, everyone's chasing these deals, all the capital is going there, but there's this enormous wealth of knowledge and expertise in Canada. And not only is there knowledge and expertise, but this is a hugely important sector as it relates to economic growth and development for our nation. So I'm putting my money where my mouth is, so to speak. Literally, I'm eating the products every day. And I'm excited about what we can do in agriculture and health in Canada and turning this into a platform that's going to be significant in size.
So you have a partner in Sobey's. Tell me about how important it is for these products to get out of the kitchen and onto the shelves for Canadians and people around the world.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, you can see all the great innovation in the world, but if they can't get distributed into consumers' hands, it's very difficult. So while e-commerce is an increasingly important aspect of distribution, retailers and, like Sobey's and the ability for them to put these products on shelf.
Still 99% of all sales still happen in grocery stores, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. So if you think about that, being able to go into a local store and a grocer who has, family at heart and community at heart is very important to us. So we are thrilled with Chartwell's coming in to help us get distribution in the colleges and universities, and Sobey's coming in to help us get distribution for these companies, early stage companies across the country. You can't. It's a game changer.
Yeah, it feels like a win for everybody because the grocers are always trying to find something innovative on their shelves. They've got to stock the regular products, but it's that constant search for innovation, flavor, different taste profiles, right?
Right, and we provide the platforms for that to happen. So we're ensuring that the facilities are well stopped, that they have all the equipment they need. We're ensuring that the programming is there to help these companies learn how to scale, because it's difficult to...
Yeah, the head chef from Chartwell's here, kind of the guide, I guess, right?
Yeah, plus the programming that we're doing out of our Calgary accelerator. It's Calgary-based, but it's a national accelerator. Teaching them how to scale a company in this specific space is not an easy task, as you know, if anyone knows, you know this, right? It's hard in the retail world. And we've been fortunate because we've seen, we've helped close to 300 companies now, well over 1,000 jobs. We're exporting into dozens of countries around the world.
Fantastic.
And it's all stuff that happens simply because we put not simply, it's been a lot of heavy lifting, but it's been well worth it.
Well, it's a unique model. I wish you all the success. I think it's a great model. I think it only can be successful. I don't see any other option, really, because it's a fantastic idea.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks.
So, welcome to the Voice of Retail. We're here at District Ventures Kitchens, and it's an amazing area. We're tasting amazing foods, and it's exciting that you're a partner in this. So, tell us a little about that, how it came to pass, and I guess the role of innovation and how important it is to be on the shelves at Sobey's with innovative food.
Sure. So we met Arlene probably 24 months ago, just as we were revamping our Look for Local program, which was really driven by customer demand. We knew customers wanted it.
Right.
We knew we were offering it, but we also knew we could do a bit better. And that's when we got introduced to her accelerator. And I was based in Calgary, and she was based in Calgary. So we actually started sending one of our local development managers over to start mentoring some of the entrepreneurs coming up through the accelerator.
Interesting.
What we were discovering was there was some fabulous products and companies that she was supporting that we wanted on our shelves. And in a lot of cases, we're already on our shelves, which was also a proud moment.
It's a real challenge for retailers, right? I mean, I know you're inundated with requests for listings, and how do you sort out the innovative versus the Me Too's? It's funny. You would think it would be just very intuitive, but it's actually quite hard. Right?
Yeah, it's a bit of science, a bit of art, all mixed up together for sure. And then ultimately, whatever we think, you put it on the shelf, and it's ultimately the customer who decides at the end of the day. So the really cool thing about our program is we've got local development managers across the country who will work with local suppliers and entrepreneurs, no matter where they are, if we believe in the product. So no store or no distribution is too small. We've got a lot of local suppliers that actually start in one store. Allows us to prove concept. It allows us also to refine. It allows them to refine.
A really interesting point. So as an entrepreneur, you don't have to worry that you've got to, stock 1,000 shelves. You can actually start in local.
For us, for us, it can actually be one store. And we've got a lot of examples where it was gone from one store, and now they're a national distributor for us coast to coast. So that's pretty cool to be able to see somebody scale in even such a short amount of time. So depending on their own ambition and what they want to do, but even if an entrepreneur only ever wants to stay with 5 or 10 stores and supply that market, we still have a place for them on our shelves. They don't need an aggressive growth plan if the community and customer base wants it, because at the end of the day, I think being one of the best retailers in Canada is going to be one of the most relevant retailers in Canada, having the most meaningful products on our shelves. So having some custom planograms is a good thing, in our opinion.
And taking an active role in the development, not just the sourcing, right?
Not just in sourcing.
Very strategic.
Absolutely. It's a lot of investment of our time on suppliers just to... the machine of retail is pretty sophisticated here in Canada, especially when you're talking mass retail, and there's a lot of obstacles to getting on the shelf, everything from food safety and all the regulatory environment around packaging. And what we've discovered is the investment's worth it. The time of our local development managers has paid off for us, just in terms of growing our program, growing our relevance, and our customers are telling us they love it. So we're in. And so as the relationship developed with Arlene, and she had broader visions and kitchens and everything else, we were very keen to formalize our relationship and support her in a much more meaningful way.
So this is like a natural extension of, I wouldn't call it in any way informal, but it's a real vertical integration back into the creation of the food, right?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think we instantly saw there was goal alignment between what she was doing and what we were doing, and it made for a very natural partnership at the end of the day.
Well, thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail. It's great to meet you and great to sample some of these foods here. I look forward to seeing them on the shelves.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
Very good. It's nice to actually do this face-to-face.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We last spoke in the spring. So just briefly, for those my listeners who hadn't heard our first couple of interviews, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Absolutely. So I'm director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie University in Halifax. And we have 2 offices, one in Truro and one in Halifax. And we have about 25 people working in the lab, on and off, full-time, part-time. And so we're looking at a variety of issues, but really the common denominator is about the future of food. So we're just trying to understand what will happen, what could happen.
Sure.
And and Canada's food price report is the anchor report. So
I was just about to ask you about, because that's your really a big flagship report for you, right?
Yeah, it's actually read. There's an audience for it now, and so the report, when it comes out in December, it's consulted. The market reach is evaluated at 80 to 100 million people. So it's actually quite large. The largest we've ever had was 285 million. That was in 2016 report.
Help me understand what that number means.
It means when we get a report from Dalhousie University, they actually are able to evaluate the readership or the number of people that may have heard of the report. So if you actually say publish in the Globe and Mail, that's the readership is this much. If you actually are covered by the CBC,
so it's the reach of your report.
It's market reach.
Right.
So of course you have to be careful because it's not necessarily 80 million people, but it gives you a sense of the reach. If you reach 80 million people, you're pretty guaranteed to it's safe to say that at least half of the Canadian public would have heard of the report. The 2016 year was quite different because we did talk about the Trump election. I don't know if you remember a few years ago when Trump was elected, everyone was going, oh my God, what's going to happen?
Yeah, it's going to happen at the border.
And we actually did, in our model, we actually saw that the Trump election could affect food prices in Canada over 12 months. And so it was covered by Fox, it was covered by NBC. And as soon as you go into America, just...
the numbers explode.
Oh, explode. So that was the only time. But this year is our 10th anniversary. So it's the 10th year.
Congratulations.
And this report, thank you. This report, of course, is an effort coming from Guelph, where it started when I was in Guelph, and now when I went to Adal, I transferred the work over there. But we actually are both universities actually do publish this report every single year now.
And last year's, the 2019 report, I read that in terms of accuracy, you said $23 off in terms of it. Unpack that for us. So unpack what you look at in the report and how you go about. Because what you're basically doing is forecasting the price of food for the year to come, right? And looking at different factors. So.
A lot of people think that forecasting is easy. It is not. And and this time of year, you're going to hear consulting firms, banks telling us what's going to happen over the next 12 months. But they're not accountable to themselves. We're a university, so we want to learn. We want to make our models stronger. So every year, we actually, in our report, we write how we did. So we basically evaluate exactly what we said the year before, what actually happened, and what are the differentials. And this year, of course, because we do that, we feel accountable to ourselves, so we want to perform well.
Right.
But this year, when we actually were looking at the numbers last week, we actually realized that we missed our high-level mark by $23 for a family of 4. So we were expecting the average family of 4 to spend $12,157 in 2019,
to be precise.
But the number is coming in at $12,180, which is a difference of $23. So it's actually quite, it's pretty good. So it means that machine learning is working. So we use econometrics and machine learning. And since I've been at Dow, man, I have fallen in love with machine learning because it works. Wow. It really does. And so machine learning essentially is a model that learns in time and it becomes becomes better,
more accurate, and more iterations becomes more accurate. Not just more iterations, right?
And the Bank of Canada will be the first to say that the two areas of the CPI that are most difficult to predict is energy and food because they're very volatile. And so, and for the last 10 years, we've been looking at food, and it's been difficult. I mean, we've 1 year we actually missed out a lot, but we are getting better. But it doesn't mean that next year it's going to be even closer. You never know what's going to happen. You're just one policy away. One war away.
One trade tariffs,
or
whatever. Right?
The weather, climate change, a lot of things can actually. Well, this year the big miss for us are vegetables. Vegetables were up 17%. Who could predict that? 17%.
And what drove that? Just for the list, what was the key driver on that?
So basically, it is it's both Arizona and California. California was affected by droughts. Arizona by actually both Arizona and California were affected by these alerts and food safety issues, and which eventually led to a recall at the end of last year. So they were
the end of the Roman Empire, as some of it's called.
Exactly. So they were supplies were very low. And so you had to pay the price. The other factor is salary. You know, if you remember earlier this year, a head of celery was like $7 because of what was happening with the drought in California.
What do you? How are you thinking about 2020 and food price? I mean, I want to talk a bit more about plant-based proteins and a lot of those things. But what are the things that stand out in your mind when you think about 2020 in terms of food trend?
Yeah. So in our report this year, there'll be four things. One, we actually look back at the last year and we see what happened, what we predicted, and what actually happened. We obviously provide a forecast for 2020. We also set trends. We actually look at trends, but it's not for us. It's not. They're not trends like people are going to drink beet juice or
kombucha is going to be.
Yeah, we don't look at those kinds of trends. We look at fundamental architectural drivers, and so one of them is AI. The role of AI, smart cart. Sobey's in Oakville this fall, so they're trying this out. Yep. But really, consumers are going to be exposed to AI much more so in the grocery store, and this is going to be a bit of a game changer, changing the interface between consumers and the industry itself. The other one is obviously climate change and the carbon tax. When you think about pricing, this is something we're monitoring very closely. 2020 is going to be the first year when all 12 months, all provinces will have a carbon tax. So we'll see exactly how that go. The jury's still out whether or not it actually is affecting food prices. And the last one is packaging. Plastics. That's a big one. And of course, we're seeing more provinces banning single-use plastic bottles. Sobey's is going out with this ban in February of 2020. So there's going to be a lot of changes there over the next little while.
And in your hometown, they're creating park benches out of plastic bags. So
I know.
It's such an interesting.
Absolutely. There's lots of different initiatives, and I think it's great. But at the same time, I mean, plastics were there for a reason. I mean, it's to keep our food safe, affordable. So what we want to know as a group is how much of an impact all of these changes will have on food prices and food security. And the last piece, of course, in our report this year will be a look at the last 10 years, the major events that have affected food prices. And so we do, it's the meat crisis of 2015. The meat price, I don't know if you remember, but beef went up 25% like in 3 months. Also, the bread price fixing scheme of 2017. That was the other big one. And the veggie crisis, the cauliflower crisis, due to the currency, if you remember. The cauliflower was $8 for a while, so we'll talk about these things in our report this year.
You mentioned Sobey's. I was yesterday, to put a date to it, but I'm going to tie these things together in the podcast. I was at the launch of Arlene Dickinson's District Venture Kitchens.
Yes.
Jana Sobey was there. There's an alliance there with the Sobeys and the mayor, and the senator wrote that report on food security. So what do you think of this innovation of starting incubators or accelerators for food? How important is that to our economy?
Well, so full disclosure, I am working with District Ventures. I've been working with them for the last, I think, 5 years now in Calgary.
Tapped into your knowledge about the system.
Yeah, so I get flown in to talk to entrepreneurs, help them in their strategy. I try to tell them more about where I think things are going. And I've been amazed by the different ideas that is coming out of that. But the one thing that the District Ventures does very well that I haven't seen anywhere else, and Arlene has to be credited for it, is this connection with retail. And so in Calgary, they have partnerships with retailers. It's great to build something, but if nobody comes or if nobody knows,
can't get it on the shelf.
You can't get it on the shelf, and that's the game. That's the big game. And that's why Sobeys were there in Toronto when it was announced, when the Food Starter was relaunched in Toronto with Arlene. That connection is so critical for startups, that exposure.
And it was really good to see because the mayor was there, John Tory was there, so it's a really a nice model, I think, as well as this full life cycle getting on the product of government and private sector integration together.
Exactly, and
at all levels, like municipal, provincial, federal, even the senator was there.
Yeah, it's a model that I think works. You have to really work hard at it. There's a bunch of people like me that give their time to help out because we're believers. I mean, the future of food is obviously what goes on in grocery stores, but what's not going on in grocery stores as well. You got to think about all these new ideas coming out, and often, I mean, they're people are coming from different countries, women. I mean, there's lots of diversity around that table whenever I fly into Calgary, which is refreshing, really.
Yeah. That's also what struck me is the amount of different people who are coming from different places around the world, making food or value-added food here, and then exporting it actually back to where they came from.
Absolutely.
Because of Canada's great reputation of food safety and accelerators like what they're doing. Let's pivot from that into talking about veganism and plant-based.
Yes.
That's had to be one of the trends this year. I mean, recently you've been talking about veganism, and there's been a lot of
protein war.
The protein wars. What do you think? Is it just a kind of a passing thing, or is this kind of the indicators of a longer cycle?
I'm worried. It's been a challenge. I actually have seen a lot of nastiness on social media against me, against other people. It's divide. I mean, this whole notion of proteins is dividing people, which it shouldn't. I mean, it's food. We're supposed to be uniting.
It doesn't
people.
jump out as a polarizing topic, but it seems to be.
Yeah, there are a lot of. Whenever I get attacked on social media, I do get a bunch of vegans telling me that, they're vegans, and they do acknowledge that there are a lot of crazy vegans out there. So that's reassuring. Yeah. And I mean, we actually think that there's probably 470,000 vegans in Canada, and that's it. They're very vocal, though, and they think that there's a bit of a window of opportunity to really bring forward their cause, because some of them actually see this as a cult. I don't think veganism is a cult. Actually, I think we owe a lot to vegans because it actually brings diversity. I mean,
food innovation.
Absolutely, and so there's different ways to see this notion of protein, and I think it's needed because I mean, for a very long time, the concept of meat got boring. I mean. It's great to have beef, chicken, and pork, but what else? And there's more excitement around the meat counter, more so than ever before, which is great. I hope that 2020 will bring more peace or truce, I guess, between camps.
A truce in the protein wars. You've heard it here.
That's right, exactly. And so hopefully we'll see something that is a little bit more peaceful. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about 2020 in the context of something else, edibles and cannabis. You and I talked about cannabis edibles earlier in the year as it was going to come to be, and it's recently, the legislation has passed, but there's no real product on the shelves yet. Anything you're thinking as it evolved, or anything you've seen between the spring and now we've actually launched and people are starting to launch products? I saw some Canopy launch a ginger ale, a cannabis-infused ginger ale. Any thoughts around 2020 in terms of edibles and cannabis? Do you still think it's an under or overwhelming opportunity in the fullness of time?
It is underwhelming right now. I mean, licenses are coming out, and I do believe that Health Canada itself is actually overwhelmed by the number of applications.
And you've said before, it's interesting that they're the regulator instead of the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, whose meat and potatoes is to do, so to speak, is to do exactly that, food manufacturing.
Exactly, and I think they're going to learn that perhaps we should perhaps consider edibles as a food product and not a drug, because it really bogs down the system, and so I think over time we'll learn more, and I think everything that's happening right now is by design. When you look at the attitude coming out of Ottawa, they are really legalizing or decriminalizing cannabis. They're not legalizing it, really. And so it's a bit of a mirage. And so that's why I actually do think that the U.S. is now ahead of Canada. And they haven't really legalized cannabis. They've legalized CBD.
That's a big step forward for them, right? The Farm Act that made a clear distinction.
If you look at what's happening in the U.S., the market is more liberated federally than Canada. The advantage that we have is that we can trace and track products, monitor quality, regulate as much as we can. That's the advantage we have, support research on cannabis. Those are the advantages that they don't have. But when you look at marketability and market interest, right now, I would argue that most Canadians would be surprised to realize that the U.S. is ahead of Canada, despite Trump.
It's funny, you said, I've heard you say before, we were first but not necessarily leaders. But I think there's, we have a new government now, and the same government, at least they're past their election cycle now. Yeah. So they were tremendously risk adverse leading up to the election. And
they have a minority government, so I don't know how that will transpire. I don't expect any changes, to be honest. It'll take time. I mean, the stigma issue is going to be real for a while.
And it's really, at this point, up to the provinces. I mean, we've seen success.
In terms of distribution, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen success in Alberta, but we've seen not so much success in Ontario. I mean, there's less than 50 stores still, so they really have a big role to play.
And Quebec is really trying to, or is struggling with stigma. I mean, you look at policy, they're
increased
about
the age to 21. Right?
To 21, and so there's going to be some major obstacles across the board, and so it'll take time. It's like prohibition all over again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time. It's always such a treat to speak with you. I want to make sure that we get and reconnect back earlier in the year. I'm keen to see your report comes out on the 5th of December.
5th, that's right.
December 5th.
And we actually have an extra this year, December 17th, when nobody actually is releasing any press releases or anything like that. It's dead. Parliament doesn't sit or anything. We actually are going to be publishing a fun survey. Cross-national survey. We'll actually be sharing results of a cross-national survey on food resolutions for 2020. What people intend to do with food for the next year.
So how can people access these reports? Where should
it's all on our website. So you just Google Agri-Food Analytics Lab at Dalhousie.
Agri-Food Analytics Lab.
And you'll end up on our site, And all of our reports are all there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again for being on The Voice of Retail. Always a treat.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome to The Voice of Retail, Lika. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Hi.
Well, thank you for joining me. We're here in Montreal at the Retail Council of Canada CCCD conference. Are you enjoying the conference so far?
Yeah, a lot. It was very interesting since this morning,
Let's tell me about your journey to start your business and a little bit about yourself and about the business itself, African Soul Foods.
So my roots are from West Africa. So I'm from Cape Verde and Senegal. And I was born in France and arrived in Canada 14 years ago. So I originally worked into accounting departments into different companies. And my husband and I decided to open an African store. So a fine grocery, Afro-Caribbean store. And we did it open 6 months ago in Gatineau. And
6 months, very recent. Congratulations.
Very recent. Yeah, thank you.
So you've got the right background. You've got the accounting background.
Yeah, very important.
And your partner, which, often we talk about the art and science of retail, right?
Yeah.
So you've got the science piece. You do help do the accounting. Tell me why the specialty store you opened, the specialty grocery store. What inspired you to open that store in the way you did?
The main thing is everything African. This is our continent, and we love Africa, and we love to eat also. And so we wanted to modernize African store and to reflect the new generation. So to have it at another level, but also we wanted to open it to other communities that don't know about our products, and mainly for people that are very concerned about eating healthy, and that's what we offer with our products. We can answer this demand. Yeah.
Well, Africa has such a rich, big continent, but has such a rich history of fantastic foods.
Yeah.
So it's really how have people received your idea so far? I see you on social media doing lots of fun things.
Yeah.
It's a very fun, very fun marketing. How's it going so far? What's popular? And you're only 6 months in, so you haven't had too much experience, but does anything stand out for you in these early days?
Yeah, people like it a lot. So we have people that used to go to African grocery, of course, but we also have curious people that like to learn more and discover things. So we spend a lot of time with people explaining what is this product, how we prepare it, how we cook it, how we eat it, because sometimes there is some conditions. And they like it a lot, they appreciate it, yeah.
Now, in your store, is it a mix of on-the-shelf and fresh food as well? So tell me a bit about what kind of foods you sell and how do you sell them? Is it a mix?
Yeah, that's a mix. We have fresh product like vegetables, fruits, and we have frozen items like meat, and we also offer cooked meals that people can eat on site or at home. Yes, we have a coffee space where people can spend some time and also eat on site.
So people can come, what we call ready to eat. They can come and grab a meal for lunch or dinner as well, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting, right?
Yeah, it is.
Is a big piece of your thinking around the store, is it around helping, as you said, educate people how to cook with the different products, right?
Yeah. People want to eat healthy, so they want to change the way they do that. And for example, we have a lot of people that want to eat gluten-free. And we have different products that are gluten-free. So that's this kind of things. And we all have this international issue. It's what do we eat tonight?
Right. No matter where you are in the world.
Exactly. Same question from the kid, from the husband, and at the end we don't know what to cook. We used to cook the same thing naturally. So that's a way to change the habits and to try something new.
So you've been open 6 months.
Yes.
What are the lessons you learned already about running a store? Anything surprise you, or on good or not so good? But what lessons have you learned in the first 6 months of running your store?
We learn to know people, how they think, how their relations they have with cooking or not cooking, eating, family time, etc. So it's very interesting to discuss with each of them and to discover the different approach based on their origin also. Because,
Sure. So it's really understanding how they shop, and then you're getting a real close look at how people look to eat differently and how they enjoy your foods as well, right?
Yeah. So some people love to cook, some others prefer the cooked meals because they are hurry or can help.
But not everyone likes to cook, right?
Exactly.
Not everyone likes to cook, but they like a different flavor, a delicious meal.
Exactly.
Everyone likes a delicious meal, but not everyone likes to spend the time, right?
Exactly, yeah. Or don't have the time.
Or don't have the time. I love the idea. What advice would you give to other entrepreneurs who are thinking about opening up a specialty store like yourself? What would you tell them about being...
In business, in general, I would say that the best is to drive our future, if I can say it that way. So my advice would be to think about and decide what they want to do or what they want to become in the future, and take action to realize that, instead of sitting and let the life
pass by.
Yeah.
Well, for you took a passion and experience plus your professional skills as in accounting, so I can see it's a very nice mix for you. So
yes,
that's wonderful.
Finance is so glad.
Very important in retail, yes. Right? The finance. Well, thank you very much for joining me on The Voice of Retail.
Thanks for the invite.
It's wonderful to hear your story. I'm going to be in Ottawa later in the month, so I'm going to stop by and pick up some delicious food and sample.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So tell me, for the people who are listening, where is your store and how to learn more about your store?
Yeah, so that's Épicerie African Soul Foods, 425 Chemin Vanier in Gatineau, Elmer side, for the ones who knows.
Yeah.
And so we have a website, africansoulfood.com, and we also we are active in Facebook and Instagram.
I love your Facebook. I was watching it. It was very fun. It was very fun and very interesting too. I think that's very well done. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. So same African Soul Food. If they make a search, they will see us.
Perfect. Well, thanks again for joining me.
Thanks to you.
Jason, welcome to The Voice in Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Mike, and thanks for asking me to do this. It's always a pleasure to sit down and catch up with you.
Well, it's great to see you. We're here in Montreal at DTLQC, Retail Council of Canada's thought leadership event. So I thought I'd take the opportunity. You're based in Ottawa, so you're here visiting. I'm here visiting. So great opportunity to learn more about what you do for Retail Council of Canada, where you're based. And why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about your personal journey and then your professional journey and what you do for Retail Council of Canada.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I guess I can start to answer that by saying that I studied here in Montreal, so it's always a pleasure for me to come back to what is essentially my adopted
Concordia, right?
Hometown. Yeah, I studied at Concordia. So my background is in with the Federal Public Service. I started my career way back in the 1990s with Health Canada, and I used to develop federal regulations primarily around food safety and consumer product safety.
Yep.
Which lends itself very well to the role that I currently have now with the Retail Council of Canada, where I represent retailers on things like the development of food safety regulations, product safety regulations. But now, instead of being the guy at one end of the table developing those and talking to stakeholders, I am now one of the stakeholders commenting on regulations from a retail perspective, making sure that it makes sense from a retail perspective and is actually achievable on our end.
You know, you and I have known each other for a while. And what I learned from speaking with you and working with you is the degree to which government policy is written in collaboration to try to understand the industries that they're regulating. I mean, there's purposes to the regulation, but then there's also a bit of collaboration in terms of, will this work? Is this effective? Will it achieve our mutual goals? Has that been your experience? You've been on both sides of the table, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it has been, and ultimately, it's for the benefit of Canadian consumers, right? One of the
one thing 100%. Both industry and government shares, right? It's about the
we call them consumers, they call them Canadians, but it's the same. It's the same group of people, right? And at the end of the day, we live in a great country, and we live in a democracy, right? And government shares those objectives for those exact reasons. They want to do what's right for Canadians, but also they want to have a vibrant and a vibrant retail sector and a vibrant economy. They want to hear from us. We obviously, our members want to be competitive in the marketplace, both within Canada amongst their competitors, but also internationally. We want this to be a good place to do business, and so it's a win for government. It's a win for us when there's consultation and collaboration. Ultimately, it's a win for Canadians, and we're a model that's used and looked at throughout the world. We've had the opportunity to give talks and share lessons learned in places like Hanoi in Vietnam, in places like the Philippines and Peru, and they want to hear from us.
They themselves are trying to develop some kind of regulatory structure that works, right, that achieves both of those goals that you
because when you look at some developing countries, perhaps where looking at an industry government collaboration is something that may be new to them, they They want to see how it's done. And when they look at Canada's example of how to do it right. Now, government's going to zig sometimes, government's going to zag sometimes, and you know what? That's their job. Yeah. But in Canada, they listen to us, and then they make informed decisions based on those consultations. And it's so what my job is essentially, if I had to boil it down, is to make sure that we are heard, to make sure that the voice of retail is heard in whatever government decision making happens.
I've heard it said that sometimes it's explaining unintended consequences around things as well, right? It's well, we know our industry, you know our industry, but let me tell you what may happen that you may not have thought of with a regulation that goes in one, as you said, zigging, zagging, or different directions. Right,
that's exactly right. And often when government, most often when government, tries to introduce a new regulation or policy, it's very well intentioned, right? Yep. So whether it's a plastic bag ban or increasing food safety requirements and things like that, these are goals that it would be very difficult to argue with, and our members agree with those objectives. But a lot of times, government they don't have that industry background, they don't have that real retail background, and why would they? Right? They don't have that, so they wouldn't understand some of the unintended consequences, as you say, of some of their proposed policies would have, and then that what becomes our responsibility, right? Is to let them know that. And the approach that we take at the Retail Council is very much one that is solutions oriented. So rather than going in and saying, "Hey, you guys are trying to achieve these 10 things, and these 8 are fine, but these 2 are just wrong, and you're putting us out of business. Don't do them." What we say is, look, with these 2, you could do them this way instead, and you could still achieve your objectives while making sure that the retail sector remains vibrant and competitive.
So let's delve in a little bit into food safety and top issues. I know that food safety is top of the minds for retailers, certainly, and I've spoken actually on the podcast before about when it comes to food safety issues, there's no hesitation. When there's a recall of product, that product comes off the shelf really quickly. So it's behind the scenes when things are declared and the food safety process that I think you know intimately and probably spend a lot of time on. For the retailers listening on the podcast, particularly the grocers, tell us a bit about how that system works and the work you do on behalf of retailers with the regulators in and around food safety and food labeling and all the different things you get into.
Yeah, food safety is a very, very interesting, dynamic, and fast-moving field. There's no shortage of work in this area. There are so many regulations that impact food safety, and quite frankly, Mike, as a Canadian, I'm happy that it's a heavily regulated area. But when you think about things like climate change, a lot of people wouldn't consider that when they think about food safety, but climate change is having and will continue to have an impact on food safety as different types of pathogens are introduced in different regions and things like that, because the temperatures are changing. It's constantly evolving.
And where I was reading an article around how lettuce and fresh vegetables are actually grown in one place, but the water comes from a completely different place because parts of the U.S., for example, where we source a lot of that is under still drought conditions. There's no water, so they're importing water. And to your point, climate change is driving that. For some degree, sure.
And we live in Canada, right? And so this is a seasonal country, and in terms of
fresh, northern climate, no avocados grown here.
And I'm very happy to be living in Canada, but at the same time, other than when there are seasonal, so in the case of produce, seasonally we have fantastic Canadian produce that's available. That's what our consumers want to buy. Who doesn't love a fresh Canadian strawberry in the summertime? But given the fact that we live in Canada, a lot of this stuff is sourced from elsewhere, as you say, Canada, the United States, Mexico, and other places, Asia increasingly, not so much maybe for strawberries, but for other types of products, things are sourced elsewhere. So we, as a country and retailers, are very interested in making sure that internationally everyone adheres to the same high standards of food safety that we adhere to here. Government sets a baseline. What I've seen is that our members, our retailers, are far, far, far exceeding what that baseline is. And so one of the interesting parts of my job is making sure that everyone is meeting those standards so that we're able to do business internationally and give consumers what they're wanting year-round.
So help to articulate the standards and clarify them. That's a big part of your role. I know you and I work together just clarifying what the intention of some regulation is versus what the black letter writing is, right? Yeah. That's another important thing, right?
Yeah, so we've seen in Canada probably
one of like CASL and some of the privacy legislation.
Right. Yeah. So it's part of the fun of my job, as I say, is I often say jokingly that the thing that I find most challenging about my job is the thing that I also find the most fun is that there's no day that is ever the same as another day.
Fantastic.
Every day I'm learning something new, and so whether that's in things like anti-spam legislation, which so I'm responsible for all federal regulatory affairs, so even outside of food safety, so things like that, things like.
And you were part of the team that initially in PIPEDA and some of the privacy stuff. You were part of the team that crafted that.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. So it's kind of fun and very.
I'm not sure we should. Everyone wants to.
And very different from my government experience, right? Where I was about an inch wide and a mile deep and knew everything on that one piece of legislation that I was working on. Whereas now, I think I'm more than an inch deep. I'd like to think I'm more than an inch deep, but I'm at least a mile wide now working on all these things. But with regards to food safety, we've seen a recent regulatory overhaul of Canada's food safety system in response to a number of significant outbreaks. I think you'll remember the XL beef recall, which happened several years ago. And so Canada decided, like with a lot of other countries as well, I know the United States did as well, to update its food safety legislation. We have seen the biggest regulatory overhaul in Canadian history since Confederation in food safety. And that comes in the form of the Safe Food for Canadians Act and Safe Food for Canadians regulations. Those came into force earlier this year, 2019. Most of the provisions which impact retailers come into force in July of 2020. And as you know, Mike, we worked very hard with making sure that our members' voice was heard, and we worked with government to ensure that the worst of the unintended impacts on business were mitigated, and we were able to change those regulations to make sure that they were retail friendly. Now we're in the business
and still achieve, of course,
and achieve the food safety objectives, which we all share, right?
Because there's oftentimes, as you said earlier in our chat, there's oftentimes where there's multiple paths to the same objective, right?
Yes, absolutely, right. And so what's happening now is, now that the regulations are on the books and we're looking forward towards implementation, now the name of the game is exactly that. We're no longer commenting on how to shape those regulations. Now we're working with our members and primarily the vendor community from around the world to ensure that everyone's in compliance come July of 2020 when all this stuff comes into force.
Well, we're lucky to have individuals such as yourself with such great experience on the side of the retailers in Canada. How can retailers get in touch with you if they want to learn more or have specific questions? What's the best way to reach out?
Probably the best bet is reaching me at my email address. So that's jmclinton@retailcouncil.com. That's JMCLINTON at retailcouncil.org, actually. Not
.org,
.com,
right. .org. I didn't catch that. .org. I'll put that in the show notes as well. So listen, thanks so much for sitting down and talking to the Voice of Retail. It's a real pleasure to chat with you again, and I wish you a great week.
Always a pleasure to catch up with you, Mike.
Well, all right. Thanks to Arlene, Jana, Sylvain, Lika, and Jason for being my guests on the episode. Let's now turn our attention to retail this week, starting off with an article from the Daily Hive. Sporting Life going to opening up their first store in Metro Vancouver, Great Toronto-based sporting retailer. And I'm sure the folks in Vancouver are going to love their assortment of just the way they lay that store out and all their apparel and all their lifestyle clothing and, of course, all their sporting goods. So best of luck to them. That from the Daily Hive. From the Toronto Star article on Indigo, and just to focus on looking on what they're doing about their new inventory strategy. They're talking about a new loyalty program, Plum Plus. We've seen this before where loyalty programs have launched with a premium where you pay, the consumer pays, in this case, $39 for an annual fee, but then get an outsized benefit. So in this case, 10% off purchases and free shipping in exchange for that $39. So best of luck to Indigo. From Globe and Mail article on Loblaw and their results and how they are really in the mix. Very competitive, of course, grocery and food. We've been talking about that all episode. Very competitive business. So working on getting the baskets bigger and getting their traffic up. Traffic was a little bit down, so they're going to continue to work. It's a big, huge ship, Loblaw being a huge ship, so we wish them the best of luck. That from the Globe and Mail. Here's an article about Canada Goose. Their Asia revenue soars despite Hong Kong tensions. So that being said, they find their Hong Kong store has been impacted significantly. Lots of geopolitical trouble going on in Hong Kong. So not much they can do about that in the short term, that's for sure. So we wish Canada Goose well. Things overall doing fine, but like I said, when you go international, you are exposed to these geopolitical turbulences. Let's see what else we got. We've got from the Ottawa Business Journal, Ottawa malls in a comeback mode. Their Canada's fourth busiest shopping mall. That's the Rideau Centre, great Rideau Centre. 25 million visitors a year. They're just talking about how they're going to be even more visitors with a new light rail system. About 60,000 commuters are funneling through the Rideau Centre every workday. And they get a per square foot rate of about $1,000, one of the top figures in the country. So you'll learn lots more about that in Retail Council of Canada's latest survey, shopping mall survey, and also we'll be talking to Craig Patterson about that survey at the RCC Brick and Mortar Retail Forum that is coming up next week. He and I will be chatting on the main stage, and that'll be recorded for the podcast. Home decor chain Bouclair is going into restructuring, going to be acquired by an investor group, including the CEO. So they'll be shaking out some stores, no doubt, and then coming out leaner and hopefully ready to survive. That's from CTV News. What else we got? Looking at a couple of good videos. We've got a video from Smart Center CEO on the changing nature of retail. We've got the CFO from Canadian Tire talking about looks and lots of competition. We're ready to take it on and ready to push and continue pushing e-commerce. They reported about $500 million in sales from their e-commerce business in the most recent results. Retailing around the world. One of my former employers, Pandora Jewelry, overhauling their U.S. stores to focus on experiences. So this from Glossy. They quote actually the woman I worked for, the great Cherise Hughes, the CMO of Pandora Americas, and they're opening up a kind of stores. I mean, when I was there, and it is much the case today, that all their stores have a very, very uniform format across the world. And there looks like they're experimenting, which I think is a great thing, with some new looks and some new formats, and trying to change the excitement up in the stores. And do a great job of converting once they get in there, and once consumers get into the stores. But it's great to see them innovating around the store designs in different units. Let's see. Sears gets a $250 million lifeline and shut 96 stores in the States. I guess the shock there is they still have that many locations. Actually, they have 182 locations once they're downsized yet again, as Steve Dennis describes in the longest liquidation sale in retail history continues. Let's see. Despite resales and profitability, investors aren't deterred. This is modern retail. There's lots of businesses, the Real, all these kind of businesses that are not making any money. The rental economy, the used return economy. Still looking to see how that business model shakes out. But best of luck to all of them as they work through what their business model is going to be. Let's see. Another interesting spot. Loblaw tests micro-fulfillment for online groceries. So in one of their stores, they're doing a micro, kind of a dark store, taking some of the store and doing highly efficient picks, and then merging that together with kind of a longer tail goods. So that's interesting to see. And lastly, but not least, Amazon building another fulfillment center in Quebec this time. So they already employ about 2,000 full-time workers in Ontario facilities, and now they're going to be opening up a Quebec-based facility. I think they're first. I think that makes them pretty much in every area of the country except Atlantic Canada. So best of luck to Amazon, continuing for sure to expand, and we wish them luck. I was actually today listening to the New Canada Post CEO who talked about that their loyalty program that basically 1 in 4 Canadians belong to that, so I hadn't heard a number actually assigned to that in a long time, so interesting to get an idea of how big actually their prime business is here in Canada. Well, that's a wrap on this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you like this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple iTunes or on your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure and recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of M.E. LeBlanc Company, Inc., and if you want, you can learn more about me on www.meleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a great week.